The snow fell silently across the frozen steppe, and familiar, erasing the tracks. Imagine standing on a vast frozen plain where the horizon in the dim light of dusk, blur white. A small band of air stings the lungs, and every breath feels like fur-wrapped bodies huddling together in a rough towering glaciers. Walls rise like smoke in their mouths. Crawled slowly across the landscape, a visible reminder of the cold carving in rivers all sides. Winters lasted, the world around longer, vast, empty, and unforgiving. Sometimes stretching endless expanse of white broken, turning summers into nothing more than brief respites of thin grass, and skeletal remains of trees. Stripped bare by the season, unforgiving ice age had tens of thousands of years ago. As the sun dipped survival was not a game. Air thickened with frost. It was a daily struggle. Wind sharpened like a balancing act between warmth and frost. Hunger and no guarantee of dawn. Light and darkness. Survival was never certain. This was not the world of comfortable houses, when the balance between life and death stocked pantries, tilt with the smallest early humans, fragile, thin-skinned, and poorly adapted compared to beasts that roamed around, unravel everything. Walked this frozen earth with nothing but stone was not just an inconvenience. Animal skins and it was a predator. Always somehow waiting, they endured. Always hunted. Their story is not one of guaranteed triumph. Fire sputtered to life. Constant risk. Sparks caught on dry grass. They did not dominate their environment. Smoke curled. They negotiated a small flame dance. Sometimes winning, casting an amber glow, sometimes losing. Covered faces. Always fighting for another day. For the moment, the ice age was not empty of life. Fire was more on these frozen steppes. It was safety from the darkness, towering and shield against prowling wolves. Their curved tusks like fragile barriers separating human flesh. Herds of bison huddled together for warmth. Around packs of dire wolves, they told stories, waiting for murmuring in voices carried by the stumble of the young, stories that bound them together. Saber-toothed cats crouched in the tall grass, one child, their fangs glinting in the pressing against his mother. She pulled her hide tighter and whispered something. Humans were both hunters and hunted. Though the words were lost, they had intelligence, yes. The old man beside her closed his eyes. Ice age predators, remembering winter's past. A single slip meant death. He had seen too many friends buried beneath snow. Despite their vulnerability, too many hunters dared to light fires, build shelters, his survival was not skill alone, but luck in the very heart of the fierce determination of those who stood beside him. What made their struggle so remarkable was not only the physical danger outside their psychological one. The darkness of winter nights was more than just an absence of light. Silently. It was a cloak of fear. Gleaming in the beyond the circle of firelight lay the unknown. Predators whose eyes glowed, their ribs visible beneath thick coats, shifting shadows. A single misstep, wolf or wandering child. To sleep was a gamble. Predator and prey. To remain awake was to endure hours of fear. In cave along the cavemen, bears stirred night was a test of nerves as much as body. A reminder that the comfort stories whispered around the fire. To live through winter was to live surrounded by threats. The endless dark might broken them entirely. And the contrast of ice struggle was not hopeless. Were extreme. Humans had something different. An ability to glitter on fields of snow, to imagine what could be dazzling beauty masking the deadly cold. The shelters they built by night, the furs they sowed, storms could sweep the fires they kept alive. Plunging these were not instincts, fires creations of the mind. Smoke filled the air. The first night of winter was brutal. A successful hunt, but it might provide also a test of creativity. The next, every decision could trap them indoors, where to place the fire, forcing families to ration their supplies, who would guard the camp with the sound of howling winds that seemed like voices as the night outside. To live in such an environment was layering the knife's in silence. Every choice carrying consequences measured in survival or extinction. The moon painted silver across the land. Despite the cruelty of their world, the band of humans pressed closer to more than simply endure. Every shoulder and arm a source of shared warmth. They painted on cave walls. In this closeness, behind haunting images of mammoths, alone and handprints. None of them would see the spring. Echoes of people who refused to be forgotten. They buried their dead with care. Food hinting at rituals and beliefs that gave meaning to the harshness of their days, sustaining. Even in the depths of cold and hunger, every bite calculated to last. Not only would children receive something slightly more, their rhythm of life and death, more important than a cycle they try to understand. The distribution of food was not just survival. The ice age was not only about physical survival. Silent teaching passed down from generation to generation. Spirituality we endure together, or we perish alone. What is astonishing? The fire fragile their survival, sending sparks upward. Unlike other ice age left against the snow-covered ground, humans were not equipped. Some saw shapes in those shadows, strength, animals, ancestors. Their advantage lay in community. For early humans, in planning was not just a season of hardship, next hunt, but a season of next migration. A belief born in long hours of dark little chance. In the flicker of firelight, huddled around imagination, took sharing warmth and food. The world outside became something more than prey, but within the circle, survivors. Humans created the image of a small band of people gathered around a flickering fire. Survival inside a cave captures even within the fragile sanctuary of firelight. The flames cast long shadows on the walls. Would tomorrow bring a successful hunt? Rough stone with their shelter hold against the storm gathering on the horizon? Children slept the youngest survived the night, wrapped in these questions haunted them. Men and women echoing louder in silence than in any words avoided loud. Of hopes each winter was a gamble. Outside, all bands storm rage. For those who piling against rocks, the lessons carried inside there was warmth, carved into memory like pocket of safety against a hostile first night of winter was not the coldest, fire was not just the hardest. It was life itself. The beginning. It had to be fed constantly. The tribe reminded itself of what was at stake, and carried every ember fed, next dawn, every spear sharpened, hope often every hide pulled tighter. This introduction part of a larger struggle, stage for the deeper story between human fragility we are and about the merciless force of nature. Each challenge tonight, cold victory was measured not in conquest, but in push humans to innovate. If they woke each tomorrow, desperate winter, if the fire still glowed, and children still breathed, then they had won. At least survival was never guaranteed. Far away, every victory in the darkness, no matter how small, the wolves gave a path that would eventually lead to us. The sound in the chapters ahead, the frozen earth, we will journey deeper into this frozen past. A reminder that they were not alone in their struggle. Humans battled the environment that sought to extinguish them. We will see the firekeepers who risked everything to guard the flames. The humans, the hunters who faced beasts 10 times species bound by the same winter. The mothers who clothed their children in the same hunger, with bone needles, yet destined to meet as tribes who painted their fears and hopes eventually on cave partners. This was as not the fire dimmed slightly. It was old a forging man stirred of humanity itself. The world was locked in dried wood, but inside that frozen silence and warmth sparks of resilience glowed. For now, the light would ignite the story. For now, the night was bearable. Winter had arrived, and with it, the endless test of survival. But within that test, within the frost and the fear, lay the story of humanity itself. The relentless will to endure, to imagine, and to live, even when the world seemed determined to freeze them into silence. The first night of winter was only the beginning. The Ice Age was a world dominated by extremes. Unlike the mild winters we experience today, glaciers advanced and retreated over thousands of miles, carving valleys, raising mountains of ice, and pushing humans and animals alike into a constant struggle for survival. The sky itself seemed heavier, often gray with thick clouds, and snowstorms could appear without warning, covering footprints and erasing trails in a matter of hours. Rivers froze solid, forests turned to skeletal outlines beneath layers of frost, and the ground cracked under the relentless cold. Life in this frozen world required not just courage, but a constant awareness of the environment that could kill without hesitation. The climate of the Ice Age was unpredictable and cruel. Summers, when they appear at all, were fleeting and fragile. Vegetation struggled to survive in short growing seasons, offering limited food to herbivores, which in turn affected carnivores. The scarcity of plants and animals meant that humans had to move constantly, tracking herds, reading subtle signs in the snow, and predicting storms by observing clouds, wind patterns, and even the behavior of birds and predators. One wrong calculation could leave a group exposed, with cold seeping into bones and hunger gnawing at the stomach. In this environment, every decision carried life or death consequences. The landscape itself was a challenge. Open tundra stretched for miles, offering little protection from freezing winds, while frozen rivers acted as both highways and deadly traps. One misstep could result in a broken leg, a fall into icy water, or a separation from the group that often meant death. Forests, though scarce, provided shelter and firewood, but were dangerous, filled with predators and hidden pitfalls. Cavemen had to learn to read this terrain, to understand its moods and rhythms, to sense when it was safe to hunt and when it was wiser to retreat. Every season was a negotiation with nature. The Ice Age was also a period of climatic oscillations. Glaciers would advance, pushing southward, forcing humans to migrate or adapt, only to retreat, opening new lands and hunting grounds. These shifts could happen over decades or centuries, but even within a single winter, humans could face microclimates that brought sudden blizzards, freezing rain, or heavy snowdrifts. Adaptability became as important as physical strength. A human group's survival depended on observation, memory, and the ability to plan for the unpredictable. This relentless variation created a world where nothing could be taken for granted. Food, shelter, warmth, even daylight hours were all fragile and fleeting. The fauna of the Ice Age adapted brilliantly to these conditions, and humans had to learn from them. Mammoths huddled in herds, their massive bodies radiating heat. Reindeer migrated in long, precise patterns to find vegetation under deep snow. Wolves, saber-toothed cats, and other predators followed these movements, creating a delicate chain of survival. Humans observed, mimicked, and sometimes manipulated these patterns. Hunting strategies evolved from pure chance to sophisticated planning, based on the timing of migrations, the behavior of animals, and the topography of the frozen land. The environment demanded intelligence, foresight, and teamwork. Snow itself could be both friend and foe. Fresh snow concealed footprints and allowed stealth and hunting, but heavy snow could trap humans, bury shelters, and make firewood difficult to gather. Ice offered paths across rivers, yet treacherous thin spots were deadly. Understanding the snow, its depth, texture, and stability, was not just a skill but a matter of life and death. Early humans became acute observers, learning to read subtle signs that predicted avalanches, ice breaks, or where prey had traveled. The harshness of winter forced them to become meticulous students of their environment. Yet, for all its brutality, the Ice Age landscape was stunning. Sunlight reflecting off vast sheets of ice created dazzling panoramas of brilliance. Snow-covered plains stretched endlessly, mountains sparkled with frost, and the aurora danced across night skies untouched by artificial light. Amid danger and deprivation, there were moments of awe and wonder, reminders that even in the harshest climates, beauty persisted. These moments may have inspired early humans, giving them hope, a sense of place, and perhaps even the seeds of art and spirituality. The key to survival in this endless winter was preparation. Fire, clothing, and shelter were critical, but so was knowledge of the land, the seasons, and the animals that shared it. Early humans learned to anticipate storms, preserve food, track herds, and select safe travel routes. Every aspect of life was intertwined with the climate. Nothing could be ignored. Even a small lapse, a forgotten fur, a misjudged path, a misread sign of weather, could turn a manageable day into a lethal trap. The Ice Age demanded constant vigilance and ingenuity. In this frozen world, contrast defined existence. Blizzards versus calm, open plains versus protective caves, abundance versus scarcity. Humans lived at the mercy of these contrasts. Yet they also learned to manipulate them. The knowledge they gained from the climate, the land, and the animals became a toolkit for survival, a toolkit that would not only allow them to endure winter, but to thrive. This section of our journey introduces a reader to the unforgiving arena in which early humans performed the extraordinary act of survival, setting the stage for the fires they would light, the shelters they would build, and the societies they would forge in the heart of the Ice Age. In the icy world of the Pleistocene, the human body was a paradox of resilience and vulnerability. Unlike mammoths with their thick layers of fat and dense fur, or wolves with paws built for gripping snow, humans arrived on the frozen plains almost defenseless. Thin skin, minimal body fat, and a delicate skeletal frame made them highly susceptible to the cold. Every exposed hand, every unprotected foot, and every breath in the freezing air threatened frostbite, hypothermia, or worse. Survival was not merely about hunting or gathering. It was about protecting the fragile vessel that housed life itself. The human body was biologically designed for temperate climates, not for the icy winds and snow-laden landscapes of the Ice Age. Early humans shivered constantly, their muscles burning energy to maintain body heat, demanding far more food than was readily available. Even small injuries became dangerous. A cut could freeze over, infection could set in, and recovery without proper shelter or nutrition was unlikely. Unlike other creatures, humans lacked natural defenses such as claws, fangs, or dense winter coats. Their survival depended almost entirely on ingenuity, teamwork, and a careful manipulation of the environment. Metabolism became a battlefield within the body. In the bitter cold, calories were life. Hunting for mammoth or deer was not just about feeding the stomach. It was about fueling the body to resist the freeze. Even mild scarcity could tip the balance from vitality to weakness, from vigilance to lethargy, leaving humans vulnerable to predators and the elements alike. Fatigue and hunger weakened the immune system, slowed reaction times, and made simple tasks like building a fire or walking across a frozen river deadly. Life in the Ice Age was a constant calculus of energy input versus energy output. The extremities, the hands, feet, nose, and ears were particularly vulnerable. Frostbite could claim fingers or toes, and in severe cases, entire limbs. Once tissue froze, survival became a race against time, as infection and gangrene could quickly follow. To protect themselves, humans wrapped hide around limbs, insulated feet with layers of fur, and huddled close together for warmth. But even the most careful preparation could not guarantee safety. Every day was a gamble, every night a test of endurance. Physical vulnerability also forced humans to develop mental and emotional resilience. Fear was a constant companion. As the mind understood the limitations of the body, the realization that one's muscles could tire, that bones could break, or that simple exposure could be fatal created a psychological pressure unknown to most other species. Yet, humans adapted not by brute strength, but through cleverness. They observed the behavior of animals, learned from the environment, and devised tools, clothing, and strategies to compensate for their frailty. Survival depended on foresight and cooperation as much as on any physical trait. Contrast was central to human experience. The fragility of the body versus the harshness of nature, vulnerability versus ingenuity, cold versus warmth. These contrasts define the daily struggle. Every hunt, every journey across ice, and every fire lit against the dark demanded a delicate balance between risk and reward. One misstep could result in death, yet cautious hesitation could mean starvation. Humans existed on a razor's edge, where their own bodies were both the instrument of survival and the greatest source of risk. Even internal vulnerabilities had consequences. Humans required fresh water, a minimum caloric intake, and sufficient rest to survive. Dehydration from frozen rivers, malnutrition from failed hunts, or sleep deprivation caused by cold nights can incapacitate an individual. Unlike wolves or bears, which could hibernate or go without food for weeks, humans had no natural capacity for dormancy. The Ice Age demanded constant vigilance, constant motion, and constant problem-solving to keep the body alive. But it was precisely this fragility that drove innovation. The thin, exposed human form led to the invention of clothing, heated shelters, and the preservation of fire. Awareness of bodily limits inspired social cooperation. No individual could endure alone for long. Mothers carried infants close to share warmth. Tribes huddled together at night. Hunters took turns keeping watch while others slept. The weaknesses of the human body became the catalyst for creativity, community, and survival techniques that would define early humanity. Even disease and injury became a force shaping human adaptation. Simple infections that modern medicine could cure often proved fatal. Humans learned to avoid contaminated water, treat wounds with herbal remedies, and keep injuries immobilized. Over generations, selective pressures shaped bodies and behaviors, gradually favoring those who could endure cold, hunger, and exhaustion while remaining alert and resourceful. The human form itself evolved in dialogue with a harsh environment. The fragility of the human body was a crucible in which intelligence, cooperation, and resilience were forged. It magnified every challenge the Ice Age presented, turning ordinary tasks into extraordinary feats. A successful hunt, a fire that survived a storm, or a child kept warm through the night was not merely survival. It was proof of human ingenuity overcoming the inherent weaknesses of flesh and bone. In the end, early humans survived not because their bodies were strong, but because they learned to compensate for what they lacked. Every tool, every hide garment, every fire, every shelter, and every careful calculation was a response to fragility. The story of the human body in the Ice Age is a story of vulnerability transformed into survival through intellect, cooperation, and perseverance. The Ice Age did not crush humanity. It refined it. Fire was more than warmth. It was survival itself. In the freezing expanse of the Ice Age, where temperatures plunged well below anything modern humans experience, a small spark could mean the difference between life and death. For early humans, fire was a fragile miracle, a tool that could protect, illuminate, cook, and comfort, yet one that could vanish in seconds, leaving a tribe exposed to the merciless cold. To understand the significance of fire is to understand the story of human resilience. The delicate mastery of energy, the ingenuity required to control a force far greater than themselves, and the relentless vigilance necessary to keep it alive through winter's longest nights. The ability to make fire was likely learned over generations, passed down through observation, experimentation, and memory. Some sparks came from striking stones together, producing small bursts of flame that had to be carefully nurtured. Others came from friction, rubbing sticks or drilling wood to create heat. Once a flame emerged, it had to be coaxed, fed, and protected. A gust of wind, a shower of snow, or even a momentary lapse in attention could extinguish it. This precariousness imbued fire with an almost sacred value. Every ember was a treasure, every spark a lifeline. Early humans quickly learned that fire was more than a tool, it was a shield. The warmth it provided allowed them to survive nights that would otherwise be fatal. Around its flickering circle, they could huddle, sleep safely, and care for their young. Without fire, hypothermia set in rapidly, muscles stiffened, and exhaustion became lethal. Fire extended the hours of activity, permitting hunting, tool-making, and social interaction long after the sun disappeared. It was a thin, bright line that separated the safety of the tribe from the deadly wilderness beyond. Fire also served as a deterrent against predators. Wolves and large cats prowled the frozen plains, their senses attuned to the slightest movement or scent. The glow of flames and the crackle of burning were warnings that humans were present and alert. Smoke could mask scents, confusing predators, and fire could be used to drive animals during hunting. In essence, fire became both a weapon and a defense mechanism. To lose it was a surrender not only warmth but a protective barrier between life and death. The methods for keeping fire alive were diverse and ingenious. Many groups maintained fire sticks or smoldering embers transported from a previous fire. These glowing coals were wrapped carefully in moss, leaves, or bark and carried from one shelter to the next. Fires were tended like infants. Logs were placed, embers stirred, and sparks carefully added. Even during storms or heavy snow, groups went to extraordinary lengths to prevent the flame from dying. The attention and skill required to maintain fire demonstrates how central it was to human survival. Beyond survival, fire transformed daily life. Cooking food over a flame not only made meat edible but safer, killing parasites and making nutrients more accessible. Heat allowed clothing and hides to be treated, softened, and shaped, improving insulation. Social interaction around the fire reinforced bonds within the tribe. Stories were told, knowledge transmitted, and the foundations of culture were strengthened by the steady glow of flame. Fire became a focal point of community, a symbol of life persisting in the face of relentless cold. The psychological impact of fire was equally profound. Standing around a fire in the middle of a frozen night, early humans could see shadows dance on cave walls, hear the crackle of flames, and feel a sense of control over an environment that constantly threatened to overwhelm them. The warmth provided comfort, but the light also gave security, an area of visibility in a world otherwise dominated by darkness and uncertainty. Humans understood instinctively that the presence of fire meant safety, that its absence meant danger. This duality heightened its importance and ensured it was guarded with fierce vigilance. Fire was also a teacher. The process of creating and maintaining it honed observation, patience, and dexterity. Humans learned to identify different types of wood, to understand wind patterns, and to judge moisture and dryness. Each success increased survival chances. Each failure could be fatal. Fire required foresight. Enough fuel had to be gathered, logs stored and dried, and shelters designed to retain heat. This symbiotic relationship between humans and fire shows the evolutionary importance of intelligence, planning, and collective effort. Contrast defines the narrative of fire. Outside its circle lay the frozen expanse, silent, cold, and dangerous. Within, warmth, light, and life persisted. It was the boundary between the hostile world and human civilization, in microcosm. A single ember could mean a night survived. A lost spark could mean a journey ends in tragedy. The precariousness of fire created tension, drama, and a constant reminder of human vulnerability. It elevated every action, every moment of care, into an urgent task with consequences measured in survival. In some cases, fire became almost a spiritual presence. Archaeological evidence shows fire pits meticulously constructed, sometimes with stones arranged carefully, indicating respect for its life-giving properties. Fire was not merely a tool. It may have held symbolic significance, representing warmth, protection, and continuity. In the deepest winters, when cold and fear dominated existence, fire might have been the closest humans felt to mastery over nature, a fragile, flickering victory against the elements. Fire also influenced migration and strategy. Tribes moved from cave to cave, carrying embers to ensure a continuous flame. During hunting trips or long treks across frozen plains, portable fire was vital. Even the smallest misstep, such as losing an ember in a storm or failing to light a new fire, could result in exposure, hypothermia, or death. Fire dictated movement, settlement, and the rhythm of daily life. Without it, human adaptation to the harsh ice age would have been impossible. Ultimately, fire represents the pinnacle of human ingenuity in the face of extreme vulnerability. It was a thin, radiant barrier between life and death, the medium through which survival became possible. Fire allowed humans to transcend their fragile physiology, endure nights that should have been fatal, and explore the frozen landscapes around them. It demanded constant vigilance, skill, and collaboration, qualities that not only preserved life, but shaped the social and cultural evolution of humanity. To understand fire in the Ice Age is to understand the essence of human perseverance. Each spark, each ember, was a defiance against extinction. Every circle of warmth in the cold dark represented hope, ingenuity, and a determination to endure. It was both a tool and a symbol, fragile yet powerful, ephemeral yet essential. In the frozen wilderness, the flames humans nurture were more than survival. They were the heartbeat of civilization, flickering against the icy void and illuminating the path forward for generations to come. In the frozen wilderness of the Ice Age, survival was as much about finding refuge as it was about finding food or fire. The bitter winds, driving snow, and relentless cold made the landscape a dangerous adversary. Early humans quickly learned that no amount of physical endurance alone could ensure survival. They needed shelters, places that could protect them from the brutal climate, provide warmth, and serve as centers for community and planning. Shelter was more than a structure. It was a lifeline, a sanctuary where life could persist in the face of overwhelming natural forces. Caves were the earliest and most reliable form of refuge. Their stone walls offered insulation, blocking both wind and predators. The interior retained heat from fires, creating microclimates that were far warmer than the surrounding tundra. Some caves, like those discovered in Europe, were used repeatedly for generations, showing evidence of controlled fire, food storage, and even early art. The walls, often decorated with paintings of animals and symbolic marks, transformed mere survival spaces into centers of culture and expression. The cave was not just a shelter. It was a stage where the human story unfolded, where knowledge was preserved and transmitted across time. However, caves were limited in number and location, and not every group had access to them. This scarcity forced humans to innovate. In regions without natural shelters, they began constructing their own. Mammoth bones, large tree branches, and hides became the building blocks of primitive huts. Archaeological evidence reveals the ingenuity involved. Large bones arranged to form a skeletal frame, then covered with hides for insulation and waterproofing. The entrances were often carefully positioned to block prevailing winds, and fire pits were constructed inside to maximize warmth. These early architects demonstrated a remarkable understanding of materials, structure, and environmental challenges. The process of building and maintaining shelters demanded cooperation. Constructing a mammoth bone hut was not a solo task. It required the labor of the entire group. Bones had to be cleaned, shaped, and positioned, while hides were sewn together with sinew and stretched to cover the frame. Every step demanded precision. A poorly placed support could collapse under snow. A gap in the hides could let in wind that would freeze the inhabitants. Shelters were a testament to teamwork, planning, and ingenuity, and their success often determined whether a tribe survived the harshest months of the year. Inside these shelters, fire and insulation worked in tandem. The combination of hearths, layered furs, and compact sleeping arrangements allowed humans to conserve precious heat. Families huddled together, sharing warmth and comfort, while children and the elderly were placed in the most protected areas. These spaces were more than temporary refuges. They were living laboratories where social bonds, knowledge, and skills were reinforced. Every night in the shelter strengthened community cohesion, a crucial factor in enduring the rigors of Ice Age winters. The shelters also provided protection from predators. Wolves, saber-toothed cats, and other large animals prowled outside, especially during blizzards when visibility was low. A well-constructed hut or cave with a fire at its center created a zone of safety. The threat of the wild was constant. But within the walls of the shelter, humans could rest, plan hunts, and care for one another. Contrast was stark. Outside lay death in the form of cold, hunger, and predators. Inside lay warmth, safety, and the potential for survival. Seasonal adaptation was key. Some groups built more permanent shelters to endure long winters, while others constructed temporary structures to move with migratory herds. The choice of materials varied according to the environment. In forested regions, wood played a major role. In open tundra, bones and hides dominated. Humans learned to read their surroundings, to anticipate weather changes, and to adapt their shelters accordingly. The survival of a group often depended on the flexibility and ingenuity of these constructions. Shelters also played a role in cultural expression. Evidence of decorated interiors, carefully arranged sleeping areas, and designated spaces for fire and cooking suggests that early humans imbued these structures with meaning beyond mere function. They became centers for storytelling, planning, and ritual. The combination of practical survival needs with early symbolic behavior shows how deeply human cognition and culture were intertwined with shelter building. Even the act of arranging furs or positioning fire pits reflected an understanding of physics, thermodynamics, and social organization. Contrast defined the importance of shelter. Outside, the landscape was a gauntlet of wind, snow, ice, and predators. Inside, there was warmth, nourishment, safety, and social cohesion. Every aspect of life, sleeping, eating, planning hunts, sharing stories, depended on the ability to maintain these protective spaces. The evolution of shelters reflects a central theme of human survival: adaptation through intelligence, cooperation, and foresight. Ultimately, the shelters of the Ice Age were far more than primitive structures. They were crucibles of survival, incubators of culture, and symbols of human ingenuity. They demonstrate how early humans transformed the raw environment into habitable space, extending life, preserving knowledge, and creating a foundation for future generations. In the frozen wilderness, shelters were both a literal and figurative hearth, an anchor of warmth, safety, and human connection amid a world that offered little mercy. Through caves and huts, humans learned that survival was not solely a matter of endurance, but a strategy. The physical challenges of winter demanded ingenuity, but the psychological comfort of shelter gave humans the courage to face each new day. Every night spent safely indoors, every storm weathered, and every predator kept at bay reinforced the delicate balance between fragility and resilience. Shelters were not just walls and roofs. They were the manifestation of human will against the most extreme environment our species had ever faced. Hunting in the Ice Age was never simple, but winter hunting was a test of courage, skill, and endurance unlike any other. The frozen landscape transformed the hunt into a battle against both the environment and the prey itself. Snow-covered tracks, rivers froze solid, and bitter winds pierced exposed skin, slowing movements and draining strength. Yet humans had to hunt. Survival depended on it. The scarcity of winter food meant that every hunt carried enormous stakes. Success meant warmth, nourishment, and life. Failure could mean starvation, frostbite, or even death. Large game formed the cornerstone of winter sustenance. Mammoths, bison, reindeer, and aurochs roamed the icy plains, offering caloric bounty, but capturing them was fraught with danger. Mammoths, weighing several tons, could crush humans in an instant. Bison traveled in herds, quick and unpredictable, their horns capable of goring the unwary. Wolves and saber-toothed cats shadowed these herds, competing for the same resources and striking at humans when opportunity arose. Early humans faced a world in which every hunt could become a confrontation with death itself. To succeed, Ice Age hunters relied on ingenuity and cooperation. Groups planned hunts meticulously, observing herd movements, predicting migratory patterns, and studying animal behavior. Snow and ice became tools as well as obstacles. Hunters used frozen rivers as natural funnels, herding bison toward cliffs or pits where they could be dispatched more safely. Spears, wooden throwing sticks, and stone-tipped weapons were crafted with precision, designed to pierce hides and disable animals as efficiently as possible. Every hunt was a blend of strategy, patience, and courage, reflecting human intelligence in the face of brute force. The social aspect of hunting was equally critical. No individual could take down a mammoth alone. Success required coordination, communication, and trust. Hunters worked in teams, often assigning roles. Some distracted the prey, others positioned themselves for the kill, and the most experienced executed the final strike. Such collaboration strengthened social bonds and reinforced the tribe's cohesion. The hunt was not merely an act of survival. It was a rehearsal of teamwork, a display of skill and bravery, and a critical foundation for the continuity of the community. Winter conditions amplified the danger. Deep snow made stealth difficult, and icy surfaces increased the risk of falls or injury. Hunters had to move silently, carefully masking their approach, while the cold sapped energy and slowed reflexes. Every misstep could alert prey, provoke predators, or result in personal harm. The physical demands were intense, requiring endurance, strength, and acute awareness. Yet these challenges were met with ingenuity. Tracking signs in snow, reading subtle disturbances, and using wind and terrain to mask scent and movement. Winter hunting was as much about observation and patience as it was about raw power. The kill itself was only the beginning. Once a mammoth or bison fell, the work of butchering and transporting meat began, often in sub-zero temperatures. Large carcasses required coordinated effort to divide meat, hide, and fat for transport or storage. Ice and snow both preserved and hindered this process, freezing parts of the carcass while making others difficult to handle. Every step demanded efficiency and precision, as failure could result in spoilage or waste. For Ice Age humans, the line between abundance and famine was measured in hours and degrees below zero. Hunting also carried immense psychological weight. The stakes were not abstract. They were immediate and visceral. A hunter facing a charging bison or a cornered mammoth experienced fear, adrenaline, and awareness of mortality on a profound level. Yet the successful kill brought relief, nourishment, and prestige. Storytelling likely grew from these experiences, with feats of bravery remembered and retold around fires, reinforcing social hierarchies and cultural memory. Hunting shaped not only survival but identity, courage, and community. Winter hunting required more than skill and courage. It demanded knowledge of animal behavior. Mammoths, for instance, move in predictable patterns, responding to vegetation and seasonal changes. Reindeer migrated long distances, guided by instincts humans had to track. Wolves followed these herds, and humans had to anticipate both predator and prey. Early humans developed acute observational skills, learning to read tracks, droppings, and disturbances in snow. Success depended on understanding the environment as much as understanding the animals themselves. Even failure carried lessons. Hunters who misjudged the terrain, underestimated a herd, or faced storms learned to adapt. Strategies evolved over generations, becoming increasingly sophisticated. Over time, humans shifted from purely opportunistic hunting to coordinated, planned campaigns that demonstrated foresight, collective intelligence, and environmental mastery. Each winter hunt was both a test and a teacher, shaping survival strategies that would persist for millennia. The contrast of danger and reward defined the winter hunt. Outside, the cold, predators, and physical exhaustion threatened every step. Inside, the potential bounty promised sustenance, warmth, and continuity. This tension heightened every decision, sharpened every sense, and underscored the stakes of Ice Age survival. The hunt was a microcosm of life in the frozen world, a balance of fear and courage, scarcity and abundance, life and death. Hunting also influenced technology and innovation. Weapons became more sophisticated. Spears with stone tips, throwing sticks for distance, and later collaborative traps or pitfalls. Tools for butchering and processing meat were crafted from bone and stone. Each advancement was a direct response to the challenges of winter hunting, demonstrating the symbiotic relationship between survival needs and human creativity. Fire, shelters, and clothing complemented hunting, ensuring that kills could be utilized effectively for months. In essence, the winter hunt was a defining feature of Ice Age human life. It demanded bravery, intelligence, endurance, and cooperation at levels that few modern humans can imagine. Each hunt shaped social structures, reinforced community bonds, and honed skills that were essential for survival. The animals hunted were not merely food. They were teachers, catalysts, and, in a way, partners in human evolution. The harshness of winter forged a species capable of facing extraordinary odds, turning scarcity into innovation, fear into skill, and danger into a foundation for the future. Ultimately, the winter hunt exemplifies the remarkable adaptability of early humans. They faced a world in which every meal was earned at great risk, where the landscape and its inhabitants could kill with a single misstep. Yet through observation, cooperation, and courage, They transformed peril into survival. The story of hunting during the Ice Age is not only a story of food and fire, it is a story of intelligence, ingenuity, and the relentless human drive to endure in the face of unimaginable challenges. In the frozen expanse of the Ice Age, scarcity was not an occasional hardship. It was a constant, unyielding reality. Food was never guaranteed, and the relentless winter stripped the land of easy sustenance. Herbivores struggled to find vegetation. Predators hunted aggressively, and humans found themselves in a delicate dance with starvation. Every meal required effort, strategy, and often immense risk. To endure these conditions, early humans had to balance hunger, energy expenditure, and survival instincts, knowing that failure to secure food could mean death within days. Starvation was a powerful force shaping daily life. In the harshest winters, even successful hunters might return with limited meat or small game, insufficient to sustain an entire tribe. Roots, nuts, and whatever vegetation could be found under frozen soil provided little nutrition. Humans learned to ration carefully, to preserve meat in cold conditions, and to make the most of every calorie. Energy management became critical. Each action, from hunting to walking across snowfields, was weighed against the calories it would consume. In this way, scarcity dictated not only survival strategies, but also behavior, movement, and social organization. The psychological burden of hunger was immense. Famine brought anxiety, irritability, and despair. Starving humans had to remain vigilant despite weakened bodies and minds, constantly searching for food while avoiding predators and exposure. Hunger was not just a physical state. It was a relentless mental pressure that shaped decision-making and social dynamics. Tribes had to maintain cohesion even under extreme stress, as conflict over scarce resources could be deadly. The ability to cooperate, share, and strategize under these conditions was as crucial as physical endurance. Scarcity also drove innovation. Early humans developed preservation techniques, using ice and snow to store meat or dry it for future use. They learned to track and anticipate animal migrations, storing caches near shelters and planning hunts weeks in advance. Tools and traps became essential, maximizing efficiency while minimizing energy expenditure. Every technological and social advancement, from sharpened spear tips to cooperative hunting strategies, was a direct response to the harsh reality of limited resources. Scarcity, in essence, shaped intelligence, foresight, and human culture. The constant threat of starvation created sharp contrasts in daily life. Moments of abundance, finding a well-stocked carcass, a hidden cache of roots, or a successful hunt, were celebrated with relief and gratitude. Conversely, days of empty stomachs, frozen hands, and endless searching highlighted the fragility of existence. Life in the Ice Age was a pendulum swinging between hope and despair, where triumph and failure were measured not by grand achievements, but by survival from one meal to the next. Children and the elderly were particularly vulnerable to scarcity. Young bodies required high nutrition to grow, and older individuals often had less physical resilience to withstand hunger and cold. Protecting these members became a communal responsibility. Tribes developed strategies to allocate food efficiently, sometimes prioritizing those most critical for survival or future strength. This care reinforced social bonds and demonstrated the intertwined nature of survival, cooperation, and cultural development. Scarcity, therefore, was not only a biological challenge, but a social one. Animals, too, were affected by scarcity, creating further challenges for humans. Herds of mammoths or reindeer were smaller or moved unpredictably, while predators became more aggressive, desperate for food. Humans had to adapt their hunting techniques, sometimes traveling greater distances or taking greater risks. Winter scarcity intensified the tension between predator and prey, transforming hunting from routine activity into a high-stakes confrontation with life and death. The frozen world demanded acute awareness, planning, and courage, and only the most resourceful humans thrived. Scarcity also influenced migration. Tribes often moved seasonally, tracking resources and avoiding depleted areas. These journeys were perilous. Icy rivers, blizzards, and predator territory presented constant threats. Yet staying in one location risked starvation. Migration was a gamble, a calculated risk to maximize access to food, shelter, and water. It required knowledge of the landscape, memory of previous winters, and coordination among tribe members. Scarcity forced humans to become both strategists and adventurers, blending instinct with intellect. Despite scarcity, early humans exhibited remarkable resilience. Creativity and resourcefulness emerged from necessity. Furs were used not only for warmth but to insulate stored food. Bones and tools were repurposed to improve hunting and butchering efficiency. Fire became a critical ally in preserving and cooking limited supplies. Scarcity pushed humans to optimize every action, every resource, and every relationship. It honed skills, strengthened community bonds, and fostered the ingenuity that defined Ice Age survival. The contrast of scarcity and survival was dramatic. Where resources were limited, tension and risk escalated. Yet every small success, capturing a rabbit, preserving a bit of meat, or discovering edible plants under snow, was a triumph of intelligence, courage, and cooperation. Scarcity sharpened senses, focused attention, and intensified the human experience of life and death. The struggle against hunger was not merely physical. It was a crucible for culture, strategy, and social cohesion. Starvation also left a lasting imprint on human evolution. Selection pressures favored individuals and groups capable of strategic thinking, endurance, cooperation, and innovation. Those who could withstand scarcity, anticipate environmental challenges, and maximize limited resources passed on their knowledge, skills, and genes. In this sense, the harsh winters of the Ice Age were not only shaping daily survival, but the trajectory of humanity itself. Scarcity was a relentless teacher, demanding adaptation at every level, body, mind, and society. Ultimately, the story of scarcity and starvation is a story of tension between vulnerability and resilience. Ice Age humans existed on the knife's edge, where every meal was a conquest, every hunt a gamble, and every winter a test of endurance. Hunger shaped behavior, innovation, and social bonds, and in turn, human ingenuity and cooperation allowed survival in a world that offered little mercy. Scarcity was both a threat and a catalyst, forging the intelligence, strategy, and communal structures that would allow humans to endure and ultimately thrive. In one of the most unforgiving climates in history, in the frozen world, where scarcity was constant and food never guaranteed, every act of survival was a triumph. Each preserved carcass, each successful hunt, and each shared meal reinforced the delicate balance between life and death. Hunger was a relentless companion, but it was also a driving force that transformed vulnerability into ingenuity, fear into strategy, and deprivation into the foundation of human resilience. In the merciless winters of the Ice Age, clothing was not fashion, it was survival. Without thick coats, layered furs, and protective coverings, human flesh was exposed to freezing temperatures that could claim life within hours. Early humans faced the bitter reality that their thin skin, small body mass, and minimal fat offered almost no natural insulation. To endure, they had to wrap themselves in the hides of the very animals they hunted, turning the spoils of their labor into shields against the cold. Clothing became the first line of defense, the barrier between warmth and frost, life and death. The development of clothing was a monumental leap in human ingenuity. Furs were carefully selected for thickness and insulation, sewn together with sinew and shaped to fit the body. Hands, feet, and heads were given special attention, as extremities were the most susceptible to frostbite. Moccasin-like footwear, fur-lined gloves, and hooded garments allowed early humans to move across icy plains with reduced risk of exposure. These garments were not simple. They were sophisticated adaptations, reflecting keen observation of materials, anatomy, and the environment. Every stitch was a decision with life or death consequences. Clothing also reflected social cooperation. Processing animal hides required effort, knowledge, and shared labor. Skins had to be cleaned, tanned, and softened using tools and techniques that likely involved multiple tribe members. Sewing hides into functional garments demanded dexterity and time, with mistakes potentially rendering the clothing useless. The process reinforced social bonds and knowledge transmission, as techniques were passed from elder to younger generations. The act of clothing oneself was therefore both a practical survival skill and a cultural practice. Layering was another key adaptation. Early humans quickly learned that multiple layers trapped air and preserved warmth more effectively than a single thick pelt. Underlayers kept the body insulated and dry, while outer layers protected against wind, snow, and moisture. This understanding of thermodynamics, trapping heat and shielding from cold, was likely discovered through trial and error over generations. In essence, clothing became a mobile shelter, extending protection of home and fire to wherever humans traveled in the frozen world. The psychological comfort of clothing should not be underestimated. Bundled in furs, early humans could venture farther from the fire, hunt longer, and endure longer storms. The warmth and protection provided confidence and reduced anxiety about exposure, allowing individuals to focus on complex tasks such as hunting, toolmaking, or scouting new territory. Clothing, in effect, extended both physical endurance and mental resilience, turning vulnerability into capability. Clothing also evolved alongside other survival technologies. Fire, shelter, and clothing worked in synergy. Fire provided heat to warm frozen garments and dry wet furs. Shelters offered space to repair or craft new clothing, and clothing allowed humans to venture beyond shelters to gather food and resources. This interplay of technologies created a feedback loop, where one innovation amplified the effectiveness of the others. The Ice Age forced humans to integrate these elements into a cohesive survival strategy. Adaptation to extreme cold also spurred creativity in materials and design. Different animal hides served different purposes. Thick, dense furs provided insulation, while softer, flexible pelts allowed for mobility. Some evidence suggests early humans may have decorated garments, perhaps as identification or symbolic expression, hinting at the intersection of survival and culture. Even in the harshest climates, humans sought not only warmth but also identity, beauty, and social cohesion through clothing. The extremities remained a critical focus. Feet had to endure long treks across ice. Hands had to wield weapons and tools without freezing, and faces required protection from windburn and frostbite. Hoods, mittens, and wraps were crafted to cover vulnerable areas while allowing functionality. Humans balanced protection with mobility, understanding that too much bulk could impede movement, while too little could prove fatal. Clothing was not merely about warmth. It was about optimizing human performance in a hostile environment. Contrast defined the human experience with clothing. Outside the layers of fur, the world was a frozen expanse of wind, snow, and danger. Inside these protective garments, humans could navigate the wilderness, hunt, and gather, extending the range of survival far beyond what their bodies alone could endure. Clothing turned vulnerability into agency, allowing humans to assert control over a world that constantly threatened to overwhelm them. Clothing also shaped social and cultural structures. Skilled individuals who could process hides and sew garments likely held essential status within the group. Knowledge of techniques, patterns, and materials became valuable, fostering mentorship and cultural transmission. The creation and maintenance of clothing reinforced communal interdependence, emphasizing that survival depended not solely on individual skill, but on cooperation, communication, and shared knowledge. The combination of clothing, shelter, and fire demonstrates the ingenuity of early humans. Where physiology alone was insufficient, technology compensated. Humans extended their natural capabilities, counteracting cold, exhaustion, and environmental hazards. Every garment was a testament to foresight, creativity, and adaptation. Survival in the Ice Age was not about passive endurance. It was about actively reshaping the environment and oneself to endure extremes that would challenge even the hardiest species. Ultimately, clothing in the Ice Age was a tangible manifestation of human ingenuity and resilience. It transformed vulnerability into possibility, allowing early humans to explore frozen landscapes, hunt dangerous animals, and endure nights that would otherwise be fatal. Each layer, stitch, and wrap represented knowledge passed through generations, a bridge between instinct and intelligence, necessity and culture. Clothing was more than protection. It was a lifeline, a tool, and a symbol of humanity's determination to survive, even in the coldest and most unforgiving winters in history. In the harsh, frozen world of the Ice Age, survival was never a solitary endeavor. The bitter cold, scarcity of food, and omnipresent predators meant that humans could only endure through cooperation, social cohesion, and the strength of familial bonds. Early humans relied on one another for warmth, foraging, hunting, childcare, and protection. The tribe became a unit of survival, where each member's life was deeply intertwined with the others. The bonds between individuals were more than emotional. They were functional, practical, and critical to the continuation of the group. Family life was central to the organization of Ice Age communities. Mothers and fathers protected, fed, and taught children essential skills for survival. Children learned to track animals, recognize edible plants, handle tools, and navigate the frozen landscape from a very young age. Play was often intertwined with practical training, as imitation of adult behavior prepared them for the harsh realities ahead. The family unit was both a source of care and a training ground for resilience, ensuring that knowledge, skill, and culture could survive even the deadliest winters. Elders held a crucial role within the tribe. Their accumulated experience allowed the group to anticipate storms, plan hunting trips, locate hidden resources, and manage risks. Knowledge of seasonal changes, animal behavior, and terrain could mean the difference between feast and famine. Elders were repositories of wisdom, and their survival was as important as that of the strongest hunters. In this sense, social structure became inseparable from survival. Every member, from infant to elder, played a vital role in the tribe's continuity. The physical proximity of family and group members had a practical purpose: warmth, huddling together in shelters, sharing furs and body heat, and sleeping near the fire were strategies that increased survival rates. The simple act of holding a child close, sharing a blanket, or pressing against one another in the cold was both an emotional and biological strategy. Physical closeness fostered trust, reinforced bonds, and created a microenvironment where life could persist despite the bitter wind outside. Social bonds extended beyond immediate family. Cooperation was essential during hunting, but also in food preparation, shelter construction, and fire maintenance. Tasks were divided based on skill, strength, and experience. Hunters, gatherers, toolmakers, and caregivers all contributed to the collective survival. This interdependence reinforced the importance of empathy, communication, and trust. Social cohesion was not just a byproduct of living together. It was an evolutionary necessity. Tribes with stronger bonds were more likely to survive, while isolated or fragmented groups faced higher mortality. Rituals and shared behaviors further strengthened social cohesion. Eating together, tending fires, storytelling, and performing tasks in coordinated ways reinforced group identity. Even small routines, such as taking turns watching over infants or guarding the shelter during a blizzard, built a culture of mutual responsibility. These repeated acts fostered predictability, reliability, and trust, essential elements in a world where danger was constant and the cost of failure was life itself. Communication played a pivotal role in reinforcing bonds. While spoken language was likely limited, early humans used gestures, vocalizations, and expressions to coordinate hunting, warn of danger, and convey knowledge. Shared understanding of tasks and environment strengthened collaboration. Every signal, every gesture had survival value. Miscommunication could result in missed hunts, injuries, or exposure to the elements, highlighting the deep connection between social cohesion and practical survival. Conflict and cooperation coexisted within these groups. Scarcity of resources and harsh conditions could produce tension, yet the survival imperative demanded resolution. Early humans likely developed social norms, hierarchies, and roles to manage disputes, distribute resources, and ensure fairness. The balance between individual needs and group welfare became critical. Social rules were as vital as fire or shelter, an evolved strategy to maintain order and enhance collective survival. The emotional aspect of social bonds cannot be overlooked. Affection, comfort, and reassurance helped humans endure stress, fear, and hunger. Hugs, touches, and shared warmth had physiological effects, reducing stress and conserving energy. The psychological resilience afforded by social bonds increased the likelihood of survival in a world dominated by cold, scarcity, and predators. The human need for connection was not only cultural, it was deeply tied to biological survival. Shared tasks and mutual support also allowed humans to innovate. Complex hunting strategies, construction of shelters, and crafting of clothing often required multiple hands and coordinated effort. These collaborative tasks fostered learning and knowledge transfer. Each generation absorbed the wisdom and skills of the previous one, creating a cultural continuity that extended beyond immediate survival. Cooperation became both a survival tool and a cultural engine, accelerating human adaptation to extreme environments. The contrast of vulnerability and protection is central to understanding social life in the Ice Age. Outside, the landscape was harsh, unpredictable, and lethal. Inside, humans found warmth, safety, nourishment, and social support. Every interaction, whether sharing food, tending a fire, or comforting a child, was an act of survival. Social bonds transformed the harsh environment from a solitary trial into a collective endeavor, turning fear into coordination, weakness into strategy, and cold into shared warmth. Ultimately, social bonds and family life in the Ice Age were as critical as fire, shelter, or clothing. They provided a framework for emotional, physical, and cultural resilience. The connections between individuals allowed humans to endure extreme conditions, manage scarcity, and coordinate complex tasks. Life on the edge of survival depended not only on strength and ingenuity, but on the ability to form, maintain, and rely on deep, cooperative relationships. In the frozen world, it was these bonds, family, tribe, and community, that became the lifeline ensuring humanity's endurance and continuity. In the frozen world of the Ice Age, survival was more than physical endurance. It was also a mental and spiritual challenge. Humans faced relentless cold, scarcity of food, and constant threats from predators. In such a harsh environment, rituals and beliefs emerged as crucial tools to cope with fear, uncertainty, and mortality. These practices were not merely symbolic. They structured daily life, reinforced social cohesion, and provided a sense of control over the unpredictable forces of nature. Early humans imbued fire, animals, and even the landscape itself with spiritual significance, blending survival with meaning. Fire, the central tool of survival, often took on a sacred role. Its warmth kept bodies alive, but its flickering light also illuminated the human imagination. Around the hearth, early humans performed repeated gestures, maintained careful routines, and created patterns that may have served both practical and symbolic purposes. Fire was tended meticulously, protected as a precious entity, and sometimes even transported as a revered presence during migrations. In essence, fire became a bridge between the physical and spiritual worlds, a symbol of life, protection, and continuity. Animals were another central focus of belief and ritual. Mammoths, bison, and reindeer were essential for food, clothing, and tools, yet they were also feared for their strength and power. Early humans often depicted these creatures in cave paintings and carvings, not merely as artistic expression, but as acts of reverence and communication with the spiritual realm. Hunters may have performed ceremonies or gestures before hunts, seeking luck, protection, or guidance. This interplay between respect, fear, and survival created a spiritual framework in which humans could engage with the dangerous world around them. Rituals extended to daily survival practices. Tasks such as preparing fire, storing food, or maintaining shelters often involved repeated gestures or rules, blending practicality with symbolic meaning. These routines reinforced group cohesion, ensured efficiency, and provided psychological comfort. Performing actions consistently helped humans feel control over an otherwise unpredictable environment, turning labor into a stabilizing ritual. In this sense, the line between survival and spirituality blurred, as everyday actions carried both functional and emotional significance. The natural environment itself was likely imbued with spiritual meaning. Mountains, rivers, and caves were more than geographic features. They were seen as sources of power, danger, or sanctuary. Caves, for instance, often served dual roles as shelters and ceremonial spaces, where fire, carvings, and gatherings reinforced social and spiritual identity. Humans interpret the movement of animals, the patterns of stars, and the shifting seasons as signs that guide behavior, blending observation with belief. This early cosmology provided context for survival, helping humans predict challenges and organize collective responses. Beliefs and rituals also helped manage the emotional burdens of the Ice Age. Fear, grief, and anxiety were constant companions in a world where death was ever present. Through rituals, humans created order, expressed hope, and honored life. Ceremonial behaviors, such as arranging bones, creating symbolic marks, or performing group dances, served to channel stress and reinforce group identity. These practices transformed fear into purpose, allowing individuals to endure extreme conditions while maintaining social cohesion. Shared beliefs reinforced the social structure. Knowledge of rituals, sacred sites, and spiritual practices often conferred status, giving certain individuals roles as leaders, shamans, or elders. Their guidance helped manage hunting strategies, shelter locations, and responses to danger. Spiritual authorities strengthened cooperation and reduced internal conflict, ensuring that the tribe functioned as a unified organism. The intertwining of ritual and leadership illustrates how belief systems were integral not only to culture, but to survival. Even the youngest members of the tribe were introduced to these rituals. Children observed ceremonies, helped tend fires, and learned the significance of animals and natural features. These early exposures instilled a sense of continuity, teaching not only practical skills, but also moral and cultural values. Rituals became a method of education, transmitting knowledge across generations and reinforcing survival strategies encoded in both action and belief. The contrast of fear and reverence defined Ice Age spirituality. Humans feared predators, winter storms, and the scarcity of resources, yet they revered fire, animals, and the landscape as sources of life and guidance. Rituals bridged this gap, providing a sense of agency in a world dominated by uncontrollable forces. The interplay of danger and protection, mortality and hope, created a rich psychological and cultural landscape in which humans could endure extreme adversity. Rituals also enhanced practical survival. Ceremonial preparation of food, careful tending of fire, and structured group behaviors reinforce efficiency and order. Belief and action intertwined. Spiritual respect motivated careful handling of resources, while ritualized patterns ensured that critical survival tasks were performed reliably. This fusion of spirituality and utility illustrates the sophisticated ways in which early humans adapted mentally and socially to their environment. Ultimately, rituals and beliefs in the Ice Age were more than cultural artifacts. They were lifelines. They helped humans manage fear, coordinate collective action, and find meaning in a dangerous and unpredictable world. Fire, animals, and the natural environment were not just tools or obstacles. They were symbols of survival, continuity, and human ingenuity. Through these practices, early humans navigated the extremes of winter, scarcity, and predation, transforming the challenges of existence into a structured, purposeful, and shared human experience. In the end, the story of Ice Age rituals is a story of humanity itself. Fragile yet creative, vulnerable yet resilient, alone in a vast and hostile world, but capable of transforming fear into meaning. Through ritual and belief, humans did not merely survive. They endured, innovated, and laid the cultural foundations that would shape generations to come. The snow fell silently across the frozen steppe. For early humans, erasing the tracks of often depended on the ability to move hours before. Sometimes in the dim light of dusk, a small band of early humans gathered rivers and snow-laden forests. Their fur-wrapped bodies migration was not a leisurely journey. Breath it was a calculated strategy to find food, shelter, each exhalation of visible reminders of dictated pressing patterns from all sides. Animal herds provided the world around them was vast, empty, and the environment demanded constant an endless expanse of white broken life on the move by the jagged outline of distant mountains. But staying in one place, the skeletal remains of trees, the frozen landscape bare by the no guarantees. The Ice Age mobility became a defining feature as the sun of human resilience. The air, the primary driver migration, and the wind was sharpened like a blade. Food scarcity forced tribes to follow. There was no guarantee dawn. Reindeer and survival was never certain. As winter, especially in winter, resources in one area life and death quickly dwindled, tilt with the smallest communities vulnerable to starvation. A forgotten ember. Early humans tracked these movements, or a failed hunt could unravel, observing signs such as tracks, the cold branches, not just an inconvenience, and droppings to predict. It was a predator go next. Always waiting. Knowledge of migratory patterns was critical. Within the circle, a miscalculation could result in wasted energy, sparks caught on dry grass, or exposure to deadly conditions. And soon a small migration became a complex, casting an amber glow against strategy and intuition. Relief journeys across the Ice Age washed over the group. Demanded fire was more than heat. Humans adapted safety from the darkness, clothing and shield against prowling long treks. A fragile snowshoes or insulating footwear may have been developed to traverse deep snow, winter nights, while sled-like devices to transport fire, they told stories, food, and hides. Murmuring in voices, fire remained central. Stories that bound them together provided warmth and meaning to their fear. Overnight one stops. Child shivered. Humans learned to construct temporary shelters along she pulled her hide routes, tighter and whispered using whatever materials were available, though the words were lost in the ice, bone, or vegetation. The old man beside her required foresight, resourcefulness, remembering winter's past. Travel was too many friends buried beneath snow. Groups moved together. Too many hunters ensuring safety. Sharing survival was not skill alone, but luck, collective movement, allowed determination of those who stood beside him. Scouts to identify hazards, that luck was and families to support each other. Outside their coordination was critical. The night belonged to other hunters, frozen rivers, wolves avoiding predator territories, their eyes gleaming safe resting reflections, all depended on communication and collaboration. Driven by hunger, social cohesion, ribs visible beneath fatigue, hunger, and fear. A single misstep, yet survival relied on unity, and the line journey itself became a crucible could blur. Strengthening bonds and refining cave along essential for life in extreme conditions. Uneasily in hibernation. Winter journeys pose a reminder that not all dangers blizzards were race tracks. To live through winter was to live surrounded by temperatures plunging far below human tolerance. And yet, ice-covered rivers struggle was not hopeless. And hidden humans had something swallow the unwary, an ability predators to adapt, were more desperate in winter. To imagine what could be stalking both humans and game with increased shelters they built. Every mile traveled required the fires they kept alive, and tactical thinking. These were not instincts, the harsh creations of the mind, constant adaptation. The first night of winter rewarding observation, yes, skill, but it was also punishing mistakes swiftly and often every decision mattered. Preparation for migration was meticulous. How to block the wind. Tribes gathered would guard the camp when sleep prepared fire starting materials. As the night repaired clothing, snow continued to fall. Shelter building supplies were ready. In silence. Routes were planned. Stars pierced through gaps in the cloud. Environmental distant and cold. Animal patterns. The moon painted silver across the land. Often elders band of humans pressed closer to one another, guided the group every shoulder and arm a source. Children and less experienced members learned this close through participation, strength, observation, alone, and direct instruction. None of them would see the spring. Migration was both a practical necessity and a vital means of transmitting knowledge across generations sparingly. Ice Age journeys were not only about reaching new hunting ground, were chewed slowly. They shaped culture, every bite calculated to last. Traveling together reinforced social hierarchies, their cooperation considered collective memory, media hunger, shared hardship. The distribution of food was not just survival, and traditions that was a lesson, group cohesion, a silent teaching, temporary campsites became centers of learning and exchange. We endured together, where tools were crafted, fire tended, and strategies fire cracked. Even in the absence of permanent settlements and shadows, migration created covered ground. Some saw shapes across vast, animals and landscapes. Spirits, psychological challenges of migration for early humans were immense. Winter was not just a season of hardship, hunger, but a season of stories, and exposure to the elements testing the long hours of darkness. Fear of predators, flicker of firelight, uncertainty about terrain, imagination, the ever-present risk of the world outside might be cold and hostile. Rituals, so within the circle, and shared knowledge helped humans endure these transforming fear into group cohesion, survival into ritual, mutual care became as vital as the fragile clothing or shelter. The journey tested not only the body but the mind. Successful hunt, shaping resilience and profound against the storm gathered. Animals guided and challenged. Would the youngest survive the night? These questions haunted food, but also echoing louder in silence than any words spoken or harsh weather conditions. Each winter was a gamble. Understanding animal behavior was essential. Survived. For those who did wait and when lessons carried forward, human survival depended on memory like subtle signs and environment. The first night of winter was not the snow, nor the hard branches, but it was the beginning. Herd movement. It was a moment the tribe reminded itself of what experience transformed every ember into strategic advantage, every spear sharpened, allowing early humans to navigate the frozen world part of a larger struggle. Migration. The war also encouraged fragility and the merciless force of nature. Portable tools, tonight, optimized weapons, victory was measured not in conquest, evolved in response to the demands of they woke tomorrow. Clothing was still glowed, and children still breathed. Then fire was preserved in transportable at least embers, for one more day, and techniques for tracking and hunting were refined. The darkness beyond a camp. Every aspect of life gave along, shaped by rising howl. Demonstrating the extraordinary adaptability of early ancient humans. And familiar migration, a reminder that they were not alone in their struggle. Dynamic, the humans integrated strategy for survival, some defiant. The contrast of the wolves had their reward defined humans had theirs. Outside the species bound by the same wind shelter, facing the same hunger, unpredictable yet destined to meet as rivals. Yet the journey offered access to eventually new resources and safer. As the fire dimmed slightly, success meant survival, sustenance, and continuity. Failure could bring exhaustion, starvation, or sparks leapt once more. Every step was a gamble, outward, and every decision carried weight. Light held, emphasizing a fine balance between risk and necessity that winter had arrived. Ice Age life, the ultimate test of survival, migration, but within that test, the human frost and the fear, the frozen landscape demanded observation, the relentless will to endure, innovation, to imagine, and live. They tested physical strength, cognitive ability, and social bonds. The first night of winter, following prey, only the navigating hazards and adapting to harsh climates, humans extended their range, secured survival, and transmitted knowledge across generations. Migration was more than movement. It was a strategy, a teacher, and a crucible in which the resilience, ingenuity, and adaptability of humanity were forged. In the end, The story of Ice Age migration is a story of courage against the odds. Humans face freezing plains, predatory beasts, and scarce resources, yet they move forward, guided by knowledge, observation, and social cohesion. Each journey was a triumph of survival, a testament to the human capacity to endure, adapt, and thrive in the harshest environments on Earth. Migration was a heartbeat of Ice Age life, connecting communities, sustaining species, and defining the very essence of human resilience. The Ice Age was not only defined by freezing temperatures and scarcity of food, it was also a world teeming with predators. Wolves, saber-toothed cats, cave lions, and massive bears prowled the landscape, each a relentless competitor for survival. These predators were not simply obstacles, they were constant reminders of vulnerability, capable of striking at any moment. Early humans lived in a delicate balance, simultaneously hunters and prey. Navigating a world with a line between life and death was often measured in seconds. Understanding predator behavior became essential for survival. Humans observed tracks, vocalizations, and hunting patterns to anticipate threats. Wolves hunted in coordinated packs, relying on stamina and strategy, while saber-tooths were ambush predators, striking with explosive power. Bears were formidable in size and aggression, dominating their territories and scavenging any available food. Recognizing patterns of danger, avoiding known predator routes, and maintaining vigilance were skills honed over generations, forming a vital part of the human survival toolkit. Predators influenced where and how humans lived. Shelters were strategically located to minimize risk, often in caves, on high ground, or near natural barriers. Fires were maintained not only for warmth, but as a protective barrier, with smoke and light deterring nocturnal hunters. Temporary campsites were carefully chosen to avoid predator hotspots, and watch duties were often assigned, ensuring constant vigilance. Every choice, from the location of fire pit to the placement of sleeping arrangements, reflected awareness of the threats beyond the walls of the shelter. Encounters with predators were both terrifying and instructive. A wolf pack circling a camp, a cave lion's roar in the distance, or the footprint of bear in snow reminded humans of the fragility of life. Such experiences shape behavior, encouraging caution, foresight, and cooperation. Hunters learned to respect predators' strength while exploiting their predictable patterns for advantage. Ambushes, drives, and traps were carefully planned, turning fear into strategy. Predators were both adversaries and teachers, shaping the intelligence and ingenuity of early humans. Social cohesion was critical when facing predators. Lone individuals were vulnerable. Groups had a far greater chance of survival. Coordinated vigilance, shared knowledge of danger zones, and combined hunting and defensive strategies were necessary. Children and the elderly were protected, often staying near the fire while experienced adults patrolled, hunted, or scouted. This interplay between age, experience, and social structure illustrates how predator pressure influenced human organization, reinforcing cooperation as a key survival mechanism. Adaptation extended to tools and weapons. Spears, clubs, bows, and stone-tipped arrows were essential not only for hunting, but for defense. Humans learned to position themselves strategically, using terrain and obstacles to their advantage. Even seemingly small innovations, sharpening points, crafting nets, or coordinating ambushes, could determine life or death in predator encounters. These defensive strategies highlight the dual role of humans as both predator and prey, navigating a delicate balance in a world dominated by lethal animals. Predators also drove nocturnal and seasonal behaviors. Some species were more active at night, compelling humans to stay close to fire and shelter during darkness. Seasonal patterns, such as hibernation of bears or migration of prey followed by predators, dictated human movement and activity cycles. Awareness of these rhythms allowed humans to anticipate danger, schedule hunts, and plan migration safely. In essence, predators shaped not only physical survival, but the temporal organization of daily life. Fear of predation was not merely physical. It was psychological. The knowledge that a single misstep could result in attack heightened alertness, stress, and anxiety. Yet this fear was functional. It sharpened senses, reinforced vigilance, and motivated strategic planning. Rituals, fire, and social bonds helped manage this constant threat, providing a sense of control in an otherwise uncontrollable world. Predators, in a paradoxical way, cultivated human resilience, intelligence, and cooperation. Ice Age predators also created opportunities. Humans learned to scavenge kills left by wolves or lions, turning their presence into a potential food source. They observed hunting tactics to improve their own strategies and developed traps that mimic predator ambushes. The environment of constant threat forced humans to innovate, blending caution with creativity. Every encounter, whether successful or near-fatal, contributed to a growing repository of knowledge that would guide survival for generations. The contrast between danger and sanctuary was stark. Outside the shelter, predators roamed freely, swift and lethal, a reminder of fragility of life. Inside, the warmth of fire, the protection of walls, and the watchfulness of companions provided safety and a chance to survive another day. This duality, exposure versus refuge, defined the human experience, emphasizing the value of vigilance, planning, and community. Predators shaped not only the physical landscape, but the emotional and cognitive development of early humans. Ultimately, living among predators honed early human ingenuity, cooperation, and adaptability. The threat of wolves, saber-tooths, and bears created a crucible in which skills, social bonds, and strategies were tested and refined. Humans became strategic thinkers, careful planners, and cooperative actors, blending instinct with innovation to navigate a world filled with lethal competition. Predators were both adversaries and catalysts, forging the resilience, intelligence, and social structures that defined our species. In the end, the story of Ice Age predators is a story of balance. Humans learned to respect the power of nature, to cooperate for safety, and to innovate for survival. Every roar, paw print, and encounter left an imprint, shaping behavior, culture, and cognition. The constant threat of predators was a crucible in which the adaptability, ingenuity, and determination of early humans were forged, ensuring that despite the dangers of the Ice Age, humanity endured. In the unforgiving winters of the Ice Age, fire was more than comfort. It was life itself. Its warmth warded off frostbite, preserved food, deterred predators, and offered a psychological anchor in a world dominated by cold and darkness. Maintaining fire was a daily ritual, a strategic endeavor, and often a matter of life and death. A hearth extinguished could mean hypothermia, vulnerability, or starvation, while a well-tended fire could transform a frozen landscape into a temporary sanctuary where humans could eat, sleep, and plan for survival. Fire was not simply ignited and left unattended. Early humans developed meticulous techniques for keeping alive, especially during long, dark winters when dry tinder and fuel were scarce. They learned to store embers, protect flames from wind and snow, and ignite new fires with friction, flint, or sparks. Every element of fire maintenance required skill, attention, and foresight. The ability to transport fire across distances, perhaps in specially designed containers or protected pits, expanded the reach of human survival, allowing groups to settle temporarily in new areas while retaining warmth and security. The psychology of fire maintenance was profound. Fire provided a sense of control over an otherwise uncontrollable world. Flames offered safety from nocturnal predators, illumination during dark hours, and a focal point for social interaction. Around the hearth, humans could repair clothing, process hides, cook food, and care for the young or injured. The act of tending fire was both practical and symbolic, reinforcing community cohesion and offering reassurance amidst the unpredictability of Ice Age life. Fuel selection and management were critical. Wood, dried grasses, and animal fat were harvested, stored, and rationed carefully. In harsh winters, when forests were covered in snow, humans had identified suitable sources of combustible material, even if it meant traveling long distances or scavenging from previously abandoned sites. Knowledge of the best kinds of wood for sustained heat, smoke management, and ember longevity was passed from generation to generation. Fire was not merely a tool, it was a technology refined through observation, experimentation, and experience. Fire also played a central role in food preparation and preservation. Cooking meat over flames made it safer to eat and more digestible, increasing caloric intake critical for surviving cold winters. Smoke helped preserve meat, keeping it from spoiling in sub-zero temperatures. Large kills from mammoths or bison required continuous heat to prevent waste, and the hearth became a hub of activity, coordinating processing, storage, and distribution of food. Maintaining fire was therefore directly linked to nutrition, health, and survival. Social dynamics revolved around fire. The hearth was a gathering place where stories were told, strategies discussed, and knowledge shared. Children learned survival skills by observing elders at the fire, from crafting tools to tracking animals. Firekeepers, those responsible for tending flames, likely held a crucial status within the tribe, their role indispensable to community survival. This division of responsibility reinforced trust, cooperation, and hierarchy, showing how fire maintenance was as much a social institution as a survival technique. Fire was also a defense mechanism. Predators were often deterred by light and smoke, and fires could signal territory to other humans or warn of approaching danger. The placement of fire, its size, and maintenance routines were carefully considered for maximum protection. Night watchers would circle the hearth, ensuring that embers remained alive and that any signs of predators were detected early. The combination of vigilance, fire, and community created a protective buffer against the constant threats of Ice Age life. Maintaining fire required knowledge of environmental conditions. Wind direction, humidity, snow depth, and seasonal changes all affected the success of flames. Humans learned to construct windbreaks, dig shallow pits, or elevate hearths to improve efficiency. They developed techniques to reignite fires quickly from residual embers, ensuring that even a brief lapse would not result in the loss of this critical lifeline. Fire mastery was sophisticated skill that demanded observation, experimentation, and practical wisdom. The contrast between the warmth of the fire and the frozen world outside was stark. Beyond the circle of light lay a landscape of snow, ice, predators, and scarcity. Within that circle, humans found comfort, safety, and the energy to endure and innovate. Fire was a physical shield and a psychological anchor, turning the wilderness from an overwhelming adversary into a manageable environment. Its flames represented hope, continuity, and the enduring human spirit. Fire maintenance also spurred technological innovation. Methods for starting and sustaining fire, friction devices, flint and pyrite, dry tinder storage, were refined over generations. Tools were developed specifically for tending flames, from sticks for adjusting embers to containers for transporting coals. Each advance enhanced survival, allowing humans to venture farther, endure colder temperatures, and process food more efficiently. Fire became a symbol of human ingenuity, turning raw elements into a controlled, life-sustaining force. Ultimately, fire was the linchpin of winter survival. Its presence shaped human behavior, social organization, and technological development. From cooking and preservation, protection, and psychological comfort, fire intersected with every aspect of Ice Age life. Maintaining it demanded skill, foresight, and cooperation, making it a focal point of community and culture. Without fire, the frozen world would have been nearly insurmountable. With it, humans could endure, adapt, and thrive. In the end, the story of fire maintenance is a story of human resilience. It exemplifies the delicate balance between environmental mastery and vulnerability, danger and security, survival and innovation. The flames that flickered in Ice Age shelters were not just warmth. They were lifelines, symbols of ingenuity, and beacons of human determination. Through fire, early humans claimed agency over an unforgiving world, transforming cold and darkness into life, community, and hope. In the frozen expanse of the Ice Age, nightfall was more than darkness. It was a time of intensified danger and vulnerability. Temperatures plummeted, predators became more active, and human bodies faced the relentless threat of hypothermia. Sleep, a natural necessity, became a delicate balance between rest and survival. Early humans could not afford complete abandonment to slumber. They had to remain alert, protected, and strategically positioned against the cold and lurking predators. The long nights tested both physical endurance and mental fortitude, demanding innovative adaptations and communal cooperation. Finding warmth was the first challenge of sleep. Humans huddled together, sharing body heat to survive the sub-zero temperatures. Layers of fur, hides, and carefully prepared bedding insulated them from frozen ground and icy winds. Sleeping arrangements were deliberate, often with elders and children in the safest positions, and experienced adults positioned as sentinels near the fire or entrances. Every night, tribes orchestrated a microcosm of protection and comfort, balancing warmth, vigilance, and accessibility to survival resources. Shelters played a critical role in nocturnal survival. Caves, overhangs, and constructed huts offer protection from wind, snow, and predators. Interior spaces were arranged for maximum heat retention. Fire pits in central locations, insulation along walls, and sleeping platforms elevated above the cold floor. Even the orientation of entrances was strategic, minimizing drafts while allowing escape routes if necessary. These practices reflect the acute understanding early humans had of their environment, turning structural ingenuity into life-saving advantage. The physiological demands of sleep in extreme cold required energy management. Maintaining body heat consumed calories at an accelerated rate, so securing enough food before nightfall was essential. Exhaustion from hunting, gathering, and travel had to be balanced against the need for vigilance. Humans learned to pace themselves, timing meals and activity, to conserve energy for rest. Sleep was not passive. It was a carefully calculated period of recovery where survival depended on preparation, environmental adaptation, and social coordination. Predators influenced sleeping behavior profoundly. Wolves, large cats, and bears often hunted during low light, compelling humans to maintain constant awareness. Sentinel practices, rotating watchers who monitored the periphery while others slept, ensured early warning of danger. These sentinels needed acute senses, quick reflexes, and reliable communication to alert the group without causing panic. The presence of predators transformed sleep from a private necessity into a coordinated communal task, blending safety, strategy, and trust. Mental strategies were as important as physical preparation. The darkness and cold could be psychologically oppressive, evoking fear and anxiety. Firelight, storytelling, and social interaction before sleep reinforced security and emotional resilience. Even small rituals, like sharing warmth, adjusting furs, or recounting the day's events, became critical for managing stress. Sleep in the Ice Age was a multidimensional process, intertwining biology, psychology, and social cohesion to ensure survival during the most vulnerable hours. Children required special attention during sleep. Their smaller bodies lost heat faster, and they were more vulnerable to hypothermia and predator attacks. Families often positioned them near the center of the sleeping cluster, wrapped in multiple layers of fur, and sometimes supplemented by shared body heat from caregivers. Teaching children to remain calm, stay within safe zones, and rely on group protection was an essential part of nocturnal survival training. Sleep became both restorative and instructional, embedding knowledge for the next generation. Rest was also a time for fire maintenance. While some humans slept, others ensured the fire continued to burn, feeding embers and preserving warmth. Portable embers or protected coals allowed fires to be rekindled if extinguished. Fire management during sleep created a dynamic interplay of duty and rest, reinforcing communal responsibility. Every ember tended was an investment in survival, demonstrating how interdependent and strategic Ice Age life had become, even during rest. The struggle for warmth extended beyond the shelter. When sleeping outdoors due to migration, resource scarcity, or emergency, humans relied entirely on clothing, furs, and body heat. Temporary snow shelters or windbreaks provided minimal protection, while strategic positioning against natural features like rocks or ridges reduced exposure. Even brief lapses in insulation could result in frostbite or hypothermia. Sleep was a calculated negotiation with the environment, where vigilance, preparation, and adaptability defined success. Dreams and subconscious processing may have also played a subtle role. While purely speculative, the human brain likely used sleep for memory consolidation, problem-solving, and threat rehearsal. In an environment where daily life was a constant test of survival, sleep could have served as an essential tool for cognitive adaptation, preparing individuals for complex challenges of hunting, navigation, and predator evasion. Even unconscious processes were harnessed in service of life in extreme conditions. The contrast of vulnerability and protection defined sleep in the Ice Age. Outside, the frozen wilderness was a realm of predators, scarcity, and bitter cold. Inside the huddle of humans, layers of fur, firelight, and communal vigilance created a sanctuary where rest could be restorative rather than fatal. This duality underscored the importance of cooperation, preparation, and environmental mastery. Sleep was not merely a biological requirement. It was an orchestrated survival strategy, reflecting the ingenuity and resilience of early humans. Ultimately, sleep and rest in the Ice Age were complex, multifaceted acts of survival. They demanded careful planning, social cooperation, physical adaptation, and psychological fortitude. Humans had to balance exhaustion with alertness, warmth with mobility, and security with the constant presence of danger. Each night was a test of ingenuity and resilience, and every successful rest reinforced the collective strength of the group. In the long, freezing nights of prehistory, sleep was not a surrender. It was a calculated, strategic, and life-preserving necessity. In the end, the story of sleep in the Ice Age is a story of balance. Between darkness and firelight, vulnerability and protection, fear and communal trust, humans endured and adapted. Rest became a reflection of survival intelligence, social cohesion, and resilience. Through the struggle for warmth and safety, the human species learned to navigate the night, turning vulnerability into strategy and creating the foundations of endurance that would carry them through millennia of extreme winters. The Ice Age was a crucible that forged humanity, testing every aspect of our species' ingenuity, resilience, and adaptability. The frozen landscapes, relentless cold, scarce food, and constant predators demanded strategies that went far beyond instinct. Early humans developed tools, clothing, fire management techniques, social systems, and cultural practices that allowed them to endure environments that would have been lethal to most other species. These innovations were not fleeting. They left a legacy that shaped the trajectory of human survival, cognition, and culture for millennia to come. One of the most enduring lessons from the Ice Age is the power of adaptability. Humans could not simply rely on physical strength or instinct. They had to observe, experiment, and innovate, from creating clothing to navigating treacherous landscapes, from coordinating hunts to managing fire. Early humans constantly refined their skills to meet environmental challenges. This adaptability became a defining trait of humanity, allowing survival in extreme conditions and laying the foundation for future technological and cultural advancements. The development and maintenance of fire epitomizes this legacy. Fire was not just warmth. It was central to food preparation, predator deterrence, social cohesion, and psychological comfort. Techniques for sustaining flames, transporting embers, and crafting tools to start fire demonstrate the early integration of technology and strategy. These practices illustrate how humans can manipulate natural elements to expand their range, increase safety, and improve quality of life. Fire became both a literal and symbolic beacon of human ingenuity, a tool that defined the boundary between survival and extinction. Clothing and shelter were equally transformative. Early humans turned animal hides, bones, and natural materials into protective gear and structures, shielding themselves from extreme cold and wind. The attention to layering, insulation, and mobility shows a sophisticated understanding of environment and physiology. These innovations were both practical and cultural, reinforcing social roles, skills transmission, and cooperative labor. The ability to control personal microenvironments allowed humans to thrive where natural conditions alone would have dictated demise. Social bonds and cooperative behavior also left a lasting imprint. Families and tribes were organized around shared responsibilities, with elders, hunters, caregivers, and firekeepers all contributing to survival. Collective vigilance, knowledge transfer, and mutual care created resilience that individuals alone could never achieve. The emphasis on collaboration and interdependence during the Ice Age laid the foundation for complex human societies, illustrating how survival needs fostered social, cognitive, and cultural evolution. Rituals and beliefs demonstrate the human capacity to create meaning in the face of adversity. Early humans imbued fire, animals, and natural features with spiritual significance, transforming survival tasks into structured, purposeful activities. These practices reinforced group identity, transmitted knowledge, and provided psychological comfort. By combining practical survival with symbolic action, humans strengthened both cultural cohesion and mental resilience. This integration of meaning and utility continues to resonate in human societies today, reflecting the deep roots of culture in survival. Predators and environmental challenges shaped human cognition and strategy. The need to anticipate threats, plan hunts, and coordinate movements honed observational skills, problem-solving, and risk assessment. Facing saber-toothed wolves and bears demanded not only physical preparedness, but careful calculation, innovation, and foresight. Humans learned to read tracks, predict behaviors, and manipulate the environment to their advantage. These skills became embedded in human cognition, laying the groundwork for abstract thinking, strategy, and technological ingenuity. Migration and journeys across the Ice Age landscape illustrate humanity's innate drive to explore and adapt. Humans followed herds, discovered new resources, and learned to survive in unfamiliar terrains. These movements promoted cultural exchange, knowledge transfer, and social learning across regions. The legacy of these migrations is profound. Mobility, environmental awareness, and adaptive innovation became central characteristics of human evolution, enabling our species to colonize every corner of the globe in subsequent millennia. Sleep, rest, and the management of cold environments reveal another aspect of Ice Age mastery. Early humans learned to optimize limited warmth, conserve energy, and maintain vigilance while sleeping. Rotating sentinels, layered clothing, and careful shelter design reflect an integrated approach to survival that combined physiology, social coordination, and environmental knowledge. The sophistication of these strategies underscores the intelligence and foresight that Ice Age humans developed in response to extreme conditions. The Ice Age also forged resilience at both individual and collective levels. Endurance in the face of extreme weather, hunger, and predation demanded mental fortitude, emotional regulation, and trust in the group. Humans learned to navigate fear, uncertainty, and stress, turning adversity into opportunity. These lessons in resilience, physical, psychological, and social, remain embedded in the human experience, influencing how communities respond to challenges today. Perhaps the most profound legacy is the integration of technology, social structure, and culture. Tools, clothing, fire, rituals, and cooperation were not isolated strategies. They functioned together, creating a comprehensive system for survival. This holistic approach demonstrates the uniquely human ability to combine observation, creativity, and collaboration to solve complex problems. The Ice Age, with its brutal demands, catalyzed this integration, shaping the adaptive capacities that define our species. Contrast underscores the magnitude of these achievements. The Ice Age presented a world of deathly cold, hunger, and predation, yet humans turned these extremes into a catalyst for ingenuity and culture. Vulnerability inspired invention, scarcity inspired cooperation, and danger inspired vigilance and strategic thinking. The interplay of threat and adaptation molded humanity into a species capable of enduring, learning, and thriving even in the harshest environments. In the end, the story of Ice Age survival is not just about enduring frozen landscapes. It is about the birth of human resilience, ingenuity, and culture. Every innovation in fire, clothing, shelter, social organization, and ritual represents a response to environmental pressure, a testament to adaptability and cooperation. These lessons echo through time, demonstrating that the human capacity to endure, invent, and thrive is rooted in the crucible of the Ice Age. The frozen past left a profound inheritance, an understanding that survival depends not only on strength but on knowledge, cooperation, innovation, and adaptability. Humanity's ability to transform fear into strategy, cold into comfort, and adversity into culture ensured the continuity of the species. The Ice Age, with its harsh lessons and extreme challenges, forged the foundations of modern human ingenuity, resilience, and social cohesion, leaving a legacy that continues to define us to this day.